Gordy, but the Broncos, Selwyn Cobbo, what's going on with him?
Well, it's a fast-moving story, isn't it? Obviously, I thought he was put back to reserve grade to find some form, and he was a little bit injured. To now, other clubs have come to the party and want him to play, and I don't understand why they wouldn't let him go and free up some money.
The Cowboys have put in a pitch to get him before June 30.
St George as well, have they?
Well, the Cowboys wanted him before June 30,
So
I
did the
think.
Dragons.
The Dragons did, but they didn't agree on a price, and the Broncos have knocked it back. What I can't understand is if the club doesn't want to play him, he doesn't have a contract for next year, he's got an opportunity to go somewhere else, why hold him back? Why hold him back?
Doesn't really make sense, does it? Like
You can only think that the only sense it makes is they don't want to give another team a leg up. But, you know...
He's a quality player. I can sort of see some of the logic in it. If you're going to make a run at the finals, you want to, you want some backup there in the outside backs, and he's a quality player, former Queensland Australian player. No, I get that. But if they're going to lowball him, or if they only have 300 left in their cap, which is what it sounds like they do, let him go now.
They're a bit light on in the middle. They let a guy go for liking a social media post and paid him out. So you would think getting offered some money for a guy that's playing reserve grade, if it's the same sort of business sense, well, you'd let him go.
Well, I think we can all agree Selwyn Cobbo has the potential to be one of the best wingers, fullbacks in the game. He's an absolute superstar, or should be. And he's got the talent. You know, he reminds us or me of a Latrell Mitchell, that kind of, GI. Obviously not at that level, but he has the potential to be. But there's so much I've heard around him. Why hasn't it worked at Brisbane? Is it because of the Broncos or is it because of Selwyn Cobbo?
Both.
I think both. I thought it was a really telling comment from Billy Walters in the last few days saying that Selwyn has to find his love of football again. And if that's the case, then that's on Selwyn. When I think about Selwyn, I think about the infamous podcast that he did, and he mentioned Kevin Walters and said he doesn't coach the team. I was one of the 3 people that went back and listened to that entire podcast for an hour and a half.
People.
Yeah, there wasn't that many who did. And he made a really telling statement. He said, I want to play fullback. I want to play fullback. And I remember, before Reece Walsh, when he was just emerging, we all thought, it was a shootout between him and Selwyn Cobbo, and Reece obviously got that jumper and made it his own, and he deserves to be there, Reece. But I'd love to see... He's only 23. I would love to see Selwyn Cobbo. As you said, he's got GI sort of all over him. I'd love to see Selwyn Cobbo find his love of the game again and go and play fullback somewhere and kill it.
Well, I don't know. The Dragons.
Well, they just signed Gutho.
Well, they have got Gutho, and Gutho might potentially long-term move into the halves. Who knows? Like, he could play centre anywhere he wanted. The thing about Selwyn, and going back to Billy's quote, though, and he has to go and find his love of football, when Madge Maguire, with his reputation as a hard ass, signed with the Broncos, of all the players you thought may struggle under Madge, Selwyn would have been at the top of my list. And for Billy to say that today, it's kind of like, mate, if he hasn't got his love there, go and let him enjoy it somewhere else. Like, is it that big a burden for Brisbane not to release him?
This is the thing, Crawls, really, because all I've heard out of Brisbane is that, he's got a few issues, he gets homesick, he doesn't love the game. Some games he just doesn't want to play for reasons that other players wouldn't make up. So there is certainly, I think it has to be said, there's an issue there with Selwyn because Brisbane, you can say, well, he hasn't been coached right or handled right, and I'm sure Brisbane are saying, well, you know what, we've tried hard with this kid and we just can't get him to work.
No question in the world, Braith, but that's not... The point is that if they've realised that, which is the reason why they're offering him 300 and something thousand, half his pay packet for next year, they've realised that. And if there is an opportunity to go elsewhere, why hold him back? Like a couple of weeks ago, they wore those black jerseys for mental health. And do you just wear the jerseys or do you live it? Is it if there's an opportunity where he thinks he can go and have a better career and maybe pick himself up, let him do it.
It's a great point you make. I'd love to hear from Brisbane why they didn't let him go, because you make some valid points, some really good points there as to if you're not going to keep him, you're offering, you're lowballing him anyway. Yeah. Let him go.
300 like they offered him. He's a state of origin player, which
half
means
what he's on now.
Well, which means that's a bit of a kick in the butt. So
and there's you're right, Gordon. And there's no question in the world he's got to take some ownership here.
Absolutely.
But if it's not working for him, and they've obviously decided he's not going to be there, even though they say they want to keep him on half the wage, it ain't going to work out.
Do you know what? There's some guys you've got to manage, right? I always say that Steve Renouf wouldn't have had the same career if he played under Brian Smith. I did, right? And there's certain ways to manage certain players. And I remember we were walking off trainer one day and I said to Wayne Bennett, why doesn't he have to do it? And Wayne goes, when you do what he can do, you do what he does. And it was a great lesson for me to worry about my job and not worry about what everybody gets. And that's what Wayne does at South. With Latrell and all those guys, they're all individuals. They're not one, but they come together on Sunday. And then he'd have a saying, just as long as you bring your boots. I think he's one of those guys.
Yeah, when Selwyn Cobbo, when Madge Maguire signed on as head coach, I thought, well, they're far from the perfect match in terms of Cobbo and Maguire, the way that he plays, the way that he trains and the way that Madge coaches. And already less than a year, it looks like the relationship is over now.